Hey everyone, my name's Dane, and I am an SS3 connoisseur. I cannot give up this deck no matter how hard I try. I even tried it in this last weekend's regional. It had some mixed results. We're going to go over this deck profile, see the updates that I've made for this new Zenkai 8 meta, where lots and lots of strong decks, especially of the red variety, are running around. And I want to make sure that people kind of know why I made the deck choice that I did, the tech options that I've got available, and maybe how to combat this meta. I do think, unfortunately, this was my worst performance in like 2.5 years. Going X3 there, but there was still an asterisk there. We'll talk about kind of the difference there. I will still count it against my top streak, but I can't try to hold it too hard against myself, just given the circumstances that were outside of my control. So I'm going to go ahead and go over it. We'll just talk about Super Saiyan 3 Reboot. And honestly, this is the leader that I won my first regional with back in September of 22. I got a couple of tops with it during the Unison Warrior era, and then I got the one win right at the beginning of Zenkai. And now it's finally time to bring it back out due to some new tools that it got access to, or really generic blue got access to. So the leader is real old, but it's still very strong. Permanent, you can only place up to 6 energy. Basically, this is just putting a cap at the amount of total energy you have access to, because it in theory wants you to have access to 9 total energy. In a turn cycle. Auto, when you attack, you can choose one card in your hand, place it at the bottom of the deck, and ramp one card out of your life into your energy in rest mode. So this is effectively a -2. Not only are you not gaining because you're not drawing a card, but you're also losing a card from hand and one card out of life in order to gain this effect. So this card has to be real broken on the back, and it really is. At 4 life, you can draw 1 and flip over. And then during that, you have a same permanent where can only place up to 6, but auto, when this card attacks, draw 1 and gain 5,000 power. So you do go up to 20k, which is honestly really great for swinging into battle cards, because there's a lot of times where, like, since you're a control deck, if your opponent produces like 3 battle cards, maybe you can remove 1 or 2 with your turn, but putting an extra swing into 1 is very, very valuable. And then finally, the most important effect and why we play the deck is auto. At the end of your turn, you can switch up to 3 mono blue energy to active mode. This is an insane amount of defense just immediately offered because blue's floodgates have gotten more diverse and more frequent throughout eras, and we're going to definitely look and talk about how you can actually manage them. 3 is a lot of energy, but at the same time, sometimes it's not enough, and so we do have to run some additional tools to get more up. So that's kind of where we're at. 20k leader, it ramps quickly, but only if you really get to ramp twice, and then you do get to go off a little bit being a 20k leader. The first and most important new tool to me is a 2-card combination, but we're going to start with our new Self-Awakener, SS3 Son Goku, preparing for the final battle. This card is very, very strong. As discussed in my previous blue staples video, which I'll go ahead and link in the description if you haven't already seen it, this card is very strong just in the fact that there are a lot of blue decks that are natural 4-life awakeners that don't have good enough self-awakening. So this card being a 1 energy, pick up a life at activate main speed is really, really strong. Then you can just activate main, place it from your board to your Z energy, and then draw 1, discard 1. So you get extra filter, which is great for this deck since you are a deck that doesn't inherently draw at the beginning of the game. Seeing 1 or 2 new cards, even if you're not going positive, but just seeing those individual cards is really important. And then it also creates that Z energy without going minus, right? So the fact is, he alone in combination with, I suppose not alone then, in combination with Vegeta surmounting the Impossible Z battle card is 2 life for 2 energy. And I think that's really, really strong. This deck was always having an issue of, like, if you pick down your life too quickly, you get run over because you don't have the proper defense, because they, you know, if you don't pick to actually 4, it's not going to be enough. And then on the opposite side, if you get stalled really, really hard, then your hand size is like 3 cards and you just fall really, really far behind. So I think that is a big issue there. But this card really helps solve it because it does allow you to kind of mandate the fact that you can pick up 1 or 2 life based on if you want to use the Vegeta or not. And once you're able to pick up 2 life, then you can kind of slow roll it and go, you know what, maybe they don't attack you at all, but they do have the ability to. So you only ramp the first one, and then maybe you pick 1 up and you ramp another one, but you don't want to actually self-awaken there. You can have a lot more options there with this card just being at the speed that it is. It is also activate main if you have 2 or more energy to activate it, so you can do it on turn 1 if you go second. Very good stuff. The card is super duper good. The other card that's bringing us back into viability is our 4 of Son Gohan Brains of U7. This is our brand new promo for the deck from the tournament kit, so make sure to attend locals. 3 cost, deflect. When it's played, draw 2 and bottom deck one of your opponent's battle cards. Strict upgrade from Android 18 in terms of traits, names, better effect, and then it even has a brand new effect. Activate main for a blue. You can gain 10,000 power for the turn and switch up to 2 energy to the active mode at the end of the turn. So on your 6 energy turns, you will usually play Gohan for 3, draw 2, bottom deck a card, pay 1 to become a 30k attacker, whether that's into a card or into face, and then you're going to get 5 energy back minimum, right? 3 from your leader, 3 from Gohan. And so then if you need to spend that extra 1, making a Z extra, pay 2 to play a Z battle card of some sort. You can use 2, of course, on things like Oob and Vegito and a different tech card that we'll talk about in a little bit. But there are a lot of really great 2 energy options, and so the fact that this is a really good use of 4 energy is exactly what the deck needed. It keeps hand size up, it removes cards, it's a very solid body, and your opponent basically has to remove it. So I think my only real complaint is that as a 20k without barrier or anything like that, there are a lot of times against red that you'll play it, and then it'll die that immediate moment. And that kind of sucks. Against green, like, they can kill it with their 1 of charismatic, but if they have the 1 of, that's kind of the way it is. Whereas red, it's sometimes where, like, every turn you play Gohan, you draw 2, bottom 1, and then they just go, alright, Videl, kill it. Gohan defeating the demon, kill it. Just kind of depending on the board state. But this card is definitely a key to victory. On to some additional blue staples. I'm now reducing one of my favorite cards, SS4 Vegeta Rise of Super Warrior, just down to 2. He is a draw 4, effectively. He looks at the top 4 for mono blue cards and either adds them to your energy or to your hand. And since you can't add more than 6 cards to your energy, you draw 4 with this. 30k blocker, he'll restand at the end of the turn. In previous formats where certain floodgates were maybe a harder stop to turns, he was definitely an option that as soon as you could slam it, you generally did, and then you would just swing 30k into something. But now that it's not the case, right, a lot of times you do have to remove something while you're drawing, because if you don't remove those cards, they'll push through certain floodgates. This is a card that's really, really just gone down in value. It's still very strong. I'd be lying if I said that there weren't a lot of times where, like, this gets you back into the game, right? Especially if you're, like, sitting on, like, your Secret Rare Hachiyak or something. This guy really turns it around. And so you can just, like, draw a bunch of cards, get back in the game, produce a 30k that they have to remove, right? 6-drop 30k is a lot harder to remove than, like, your 3-drop 20s that you frequently produce. So this is just something to consider. It's just down to 2, unfortunately, now. But this card was the backbone of my previous regional wins, so here it is now. We have 2 of the newer, it's like I think 3 sets ago, SS3 Vegito Ultimate Battle Form. Activate main for 2 blues. If you have 3 or more energy, just draw a card, and then you get to swap out your energy. Being able to swap out your energy is really, really strong in this deck. Since you do ramp out of your life, you have no control over those cards. You can't grab super combos, but, you know, secret rares, the proper floodgate at the right time. There's a lot of early turns where, like, I have to charge my D-Magic because it's just the only card in my hand that, you know, I don't know that I'll need immediately. And so this card is like, alright, well, guess what? Here we are. This grabs it back for you. It does also bounce a battle card to hand. A lot less valuable since most cards still have on-play effects. You can use it to remove Z-Battle cards, which is cool, but in the current meta, there's a lot of cards that I don't really want to hand back to my opponent. I'd rather bottom deck them inherently, but, like, you know, putting a Solidarity back in hand is still better than leaving it on board, so you do what you have to. 2 Oobs. Card is just really, really strong pressure. This is, like, my biggest, like, bomb in the deck, I'd say. Most of the time you're just trying to out-attrition your opponent with a bunch of 20k battle cards, 20k unisons, leaders, whatever. And so it does allow you to apply a good bit of pressure. But Oob here is kind of a big bomb, right? 30k double, get rid of stuff. He's the easiest card to play around, so that does suck. But there's a lot of times, since you're swinging at 20 so frequently, if your opponent is using super combos to get out of your attacks, which is typically what happens, they don't use them offensively, they have to use them defensively, your opponent's going to start to feel the pressure of like, oh, if I don't build my Z energy, I'm going to be in a bad spot. And so you can really apply that bit of pressure, which can then force into an oob, right? Obviously, there are going to be times where it's a mistake to do so, but like for your opponent, but they're not always going to know it. And since you're only going to probably be playing one or two of, it's like, do they even have it? And so they have to take a risk reward. And just its existence means that your opponent has to play suboptimally, which is really nice. Resolving it, typically I do put more, if I know that one is still kind of like around, if I haven't bottom decked it like at the beginning of the game or something, or it's in my energy with no way to retrieve it, I will typically Z-charge cards out of their drop area. You know, especially in things like the skillless matchup, Kidku, you'll want to just pull the skillless out. You want to pull Koitsukais out generally whenever possible. Just making sure that you can charge as many as possible, so they have to either spend all of that, and meaning that they're not using those cards, like the more problematic main deck cards, or to just allow you to play another Oob on the following turn, assuming they can't spend it all, is a really great option. So, cards just super strong, 30 double, really crazy. Also only costing 2 alongside the Gohan. Really great. This card is crazy. This new Fat Buu, Majin Buu confrontation with a Noble Heart. If you have a Z card, when you combo it, you can pay a blue to play it, and then when it attacks or blocks as a barrier blocker, you can combo with a card from your drop area, and this card is super duper good. I think if Kidku were not the best deck right now, I'd probably consider playing more of this. But as is, right now, it has too much barrier removal. It's still good because it does help you swing around Explosive Dance, but it is a bit of an issue there where you're not doing quite enough to be able to justify more copies. But there's definitely builds where this could be at like a 3 or a 4 of, because if you have like a Z extra out or you play your Z Unison, you're in a really good spot. So yeah, I definitely do want to run more of it in different metas, right? If this was, say, like a Gohanks meta, absolutely this comes to like 3 or 4. It builds the Z energy that the deck would love to use. It obviously is a great blocker body, and barrier is an important keyword to have. Onto our cantrips, we're playing just 3/3. This is very light. I wish I could find more space for them, but honestly, I just can't justify it. So it's 3 Vegeta Disturbing Harbinger and 3 Shu Pilaf Mai. I think at this point we all know what Shu Pilaf Mai does. Ripping keywords is really broken. Preventing combos is really broken. And also just more use of energy on my opponent's turn. Like if they do decide to push through a Floodgate and I'm like, well, I don't really care if that attack goes through, I just want to get value out of this energy, Shu Pilaf Mai is just another free cantrip. Vegeta is a searcher for top 5 for a blue or Saiyan or Earthling 4 or less. So it finds most of the most important cards in the deck, right? Self-Awakened Goku, Gohan to draw, basically all of our Floodgates, and just, you know, Vegito if you need to fix your energy. It finds random little tech cards. The card is super duper super combos. I didn't even think about that. Obviously both of these cards. So I'm really impressed by the Vegeta. It's definitely one of my favorite card adds and finds. Funny that we have 3 different Vegeta GTs in this SS3 deck, but that's the way it is. So just 6 cantrips. I wish I could justify more, but honestly, when you go second, most of the time you're going to want to go minus in hand to make that Z extra, just that way you're ahead on your energy curve, which is going to help out. And then finally, 2 little more 1-ofs for good blue stuff. 1 Gohan Power Reclaimed. It's kind of just a check, right? Like, you got to make sure that if you're playing against, like, green or something, you have an answer to sell Xeno immediately. This is always kind of a big panic button. Against those red matchups, it's good to just, like, Z-charge it in the early game and get rid of a card, especially when, like, you're playing against Kidku now, since their cards play 2 cards at a time, right? The 5-drop plays itself and a skillless. If they swing with the skillless, you can combo this to get out of the 5-drop and remove it, or if they swing with the 5-drop, you might have to, you're probably taking the double, but then at that point, you'd be able to combo this off and get rid of it. Also really just randomly good against any activate battle cards that your opponent's going to play on their turn or anything like that. Just a solid card, as we all know. And then the Counter Up Monkey, definitely the card that came out the most frequently today. I thought a lot about removing it from the list entirely or moving it to the side because it's really only good against blue. But it's just one of those cards where when it comes up, it's like definitely the card that wins the game. And I think having a 1-of is just too important not to do. And it's not like it's a bad card into other matchups, right? If you're playing against red and you already have like 1 card on board and you know, swing and they try to Explosive Dance, preventing the Explosive Dance and then killing it, You know, since Explosive Dance is still limit 1, it's not like they'd be able to try it again. If you're playing against green, you could do it on the Dormant or the Uneasing to prevent those kind of floodgates from going off. It's just really strong. And I think it's really good for the control mirror, right? Like if I had to play against, say, Hachiyak or another blue mirror, this card is super duper important. On to our Floodgate suite, everybody's favorite part of the video, everyone's favorite part of the deck. We all agree. Shake, it's your favorite part of the deck. Cool. 4 Vegeta ready to rumble. 20k blocker for 4 for your opponent to attack for the rest of the turn. They got a sack and energy to the drop. This is most of the time a turn passer. I think a very important skill as you get to the later tables is understanding when you can push one attack through a rumble just to apply that extra pressure. Being able to go, all right, swing with whatever, probably like a leader or something depending on the situation, and then removing the rumble and then swinging another impactful attack is really good, especially since I do restand just 4 frequently. If it's like the Z Unison plus my leader, this might tap me out, but it still is probably a good trade for me, kind of depending on the situation. This definitely makes your opponent pass turn until at earliest like 4, but certainly at like 5, 6, people should definitely start swinging through it and try to kill you. Speaking of energy and how things work, we're looking at 4 SS Trunks Heroic Prospects. It's been a while. He's back. We're looking at how the meta has really changed. Now we are back on cards that are bigger than your piece, and most importantly is that we have access to a good Unison. Trunks was really broken when things like Zeno were really around, or like Dark Broly was the best deck in the room, or Green Gotenks. It was like, okay, well, even if I play Zeno or Zeno Unison, or I play the Baby Unison, assuming that I'm getting energy back, it's like turn 3 that Heroic Prospect is online. But now most decks can fight you at turn 3 and 4 if you prospect them, and so it's not really worth it. But if you can do it on 2 using a Unison, if you can do it on 3 while sitting behind it against certain decks, like, most decks are kind of swinging at 4, 6, or 8 right now. That's a really simple number. Is like, okay, if you can force them to go for the 4 energy plays with just 1 card, really good stuff. Definitely, like, the biggest boon for black decks is, like, this is how you beat them, right? Is going prospects. Oh, yeah, your turn's basically done. You're going to swing with your leader, a Unison if you still have one, and that's how you're going to push through. This card does come out a lot, right? This is one of the cards that's like, in some matchups it's the best card in your deck, in other matchups it's not very good, but there's usually no matchups that it's terrible in, because it's still a 1 energy 15k negate that could prevent like a secret rare swing or any random boss monster swings. Still good against things like Tapion. It's decent against Kid Ku, because if they sack their energy for Ready to Rumble, it becomes better afterwards. Likewise, it still stops like a secret rare or a 5-drop swing from attacking. Just fine. Welcome back home, brother. 3 Gohan Babies Minion. This is your answer to Koitsukai. It is a 25k on your board, so Koitsukai never sees a 15k be played, because it immediately has Servant the moment it is on board. It is a 25k. In your hand, it's a 15, but every single second that it's on the board, it's a 25. So it gets around Koitsukai, and it works in a really great way where, since it's every single attack, Android 17 still allows decks with like Unisons and a proper leader swing to push through, whereas Gohan at least requires that pressure. He's also more difficult to remove, being a 325. He's not hard to remove, but he's harder than, like, 1 energy 4k. And then he's a 25k swing the one time, or he's a Z energy. So I really think this card is really solid. This is really a great thing against a deck like Kid Ku, where your main way of beating them is going to be to whittle down their hand size. This is how you're going to force it. This is absolutely the key. And really, it's weird, because I used to do Baby's Minion first, because it was like, okay, well, my opponent's not willing to lose their hand size at the beginning of the game. But now they're definitely willing to, because our hands are just so much larger than they used to be. But conversely, now people are not willing to sack energy, because their energy goes further than it used to. So just kind of flip-flopped around. It's very funny. This card is kind of only back because of Kid Ku. Most of the time, I would rather run most of these other Floodgates. And this one, you know what? Let's talk this guy real quick. Just 2 Android 17s. Defending friends. It's just harder to get on the line. Having a Z battle card is like not impossible, but having one stick around before you go to attack, that might be a little harder. And then 3 Z energy is very difficult. I think I probably resolved 17 with effect like 3 times in the day. Definitely not as easy as it is with other blue decks. Though again, if Majin Buu could come up because we're in a different meta, then suddenly, yeah, I can make 3Z energy a lot easier. So something to consider as we move forward. And then the big tech card for the day, 4 Raditz Provoking Attack. This card's nuts. I mean, it's like bad, but right now it's nuts. This is certainly a meta call. I don't think this card is naturally very good, but in this specific meta where we have like 3 decks that it really, really impacts, I think this card is super important. So just that way people really know what it does, because it's very not played right now. So for 2, when you have a Z extra in play, it goes from a 4 to a 2 cost, and it's a counter attack. Negate the attack, play this card. Deflect, dual attack blocker, 16k. Very good stat line, to be honest with you, right? So being able to like attack through a red deck that has Baby on board, as well as just being like not weak to -15, really broken. And then when he's played, if you have 3 or more energy, you can declare a number, and for your opponent until the end of their next turn to play, or I guess until the end of their turn, to play a card with that power, they have to bottom deck 1 card each time from their hand. So against Kid Ku, you'll call 30,000. And if they respond with Chaozu on this card, you'll go your autos first, then Chaozu will go. If they want to play that 30k, bottom deck a card. And guess what? They're only going -15. You're not going to kill off Raditz. Raditz is still there to be a blocker on the next turn. Likewise, then when it goes to their turn, if they want to play a skillless 30k from their hand, gotta bottom deck a card. If they want to play their 30k SR boss monster, gotta bottom deck 1 card in hand, maybe 2 if you want to play another skillless with its effect. Card is really, really strong, and not to mention, like I said, because it's a 16k, they have to spend multiple pieces of removal. Kid Ku's removal is based entirely on those 30ks, so playing out a Raditz is basically your deterrence for both their offense and their removal, and that's really, really strong. I'm really impressed by exactly this tech. When I was playing against Tapion, I called 4,000, and it shot off all the Minoshas and Tapions for my turn and their turn, because typically you play this card on offense, right, to prevent these sort of things from happening. And then it also turned off Android 17, required them to spend 1 card out of hand for that. So, card is super busted. If you're playing against Vegito, you can call 30. If you're playing against Trunk Zeno, you can call 30. I have considered against Green calling like 35, but meh. It's just not as good, because if they're going to make you lose a bunch of cards, they're probably willing to lose the same amount of cards. But 35 would, stop Solidarity, and that's a new successor card, so just something to think about. The card is really good. Definitely only a meta pick. I don't think this is a staple for SS3, but right now where we have Vegito X, Kid Ku, and Tapion is kind of our 3 best decks, especially with Kid Ku around. This card is very, very important. We've got 1 Majin Buu Agent of Destruction in Unison. Need I say more? Card is definitely a lot worse than it used to be, and if it came to 4, I don't think it impacts most blue decks. I think it just impacts the viability of decks like SS3 and Blue Android 16, where like you take away their defensive and draw power cores, but it's not like Soul Striker or Tapion are going to suddenly go start playing 4 Boos again, right? Most people are literally taking the 1-of out of their main board and putting it in their side because they do not have time to play this card. I'm a little different because I get to restand 4, and it's like, if I can play Boo and then protect it with a Ready to Rumble, chances are only really Green or like a secret rare that specifically removes Unisons is going to be able to deal with Boo. Still just like auto wins some matchups, right? Like if you play it against Black, a lot of the times it's like they just don't have a good answer. Our super combo lineup is 2 Vegeta and 2 Zeno. Honestly, very simple setup. We have to fix our energy a lot of times. We want to be able to tap out or not tap out. Vegeta is just the best super combo for blue as a whole. So that's really all it comes down to. Good cards. We play 1 Ultra Instinct Kamehameha just for some additional power, both on game ending and game survival, especially on the survival end, right? There's a lot of times where you'll have like 4 or 5 up, you'll Floodgate them, and then they'll try to push through with some bigger attack, and you might not have a negate, but you can go, all right, well, super combo and UI, and you go to like 40 right off the bat, and you're like, all right, that's a really huge number to deal with. 4 Dimension Magic, because, yep. And then the 1 of Hachiyak, the secret rare of choice. I think this card could potentially come to a different secret rare. We had experimented with like Majin Buu being able to play on turn 2 if you ramp, but it was just a little high roll, and it's like Majin Buu isn't useful against every single deck. There's a lot of decks that can respond to it and maybe kill it or prevent it from attacking, right? Especially things like yellow can immediately do that. And it's like, this card is just good in every matchup, whereas there are matchups where the other ones, like Gohan, are not so good. Gohan is also very costly on the hand, and as a deck that doesn't have a hand size, the Hachiyak is really great. I literally would have lost round 1 this week if I did not have Hachiyak right away. So I would have lost on, like, I think their turn 2, their 2 plus a marker and my 2, but I ramped, so 3. Would have been tragic. Really, really stupid stuff going on with Kid Ku and how aggressive it can be, but I think this is probably the right choice. Again, if maybe we're in a different meta and Majin Buu is just a little easier to remove, or there's less barrier removal, you could like up this to 4 and play like 3 oobs, and then suddenly now you have way better set of keywords to give to it, right? Especially the barrier going defensive is really, really cool. But I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the difference maker that we really, really need in order to suffice this current meta. But that's kind of the main deck. And we'll move on to, I guess the Z deck is probably next here. We're playing 2 Goku Friezas. Very simple. 2/1 20k, can't attack, +1, gain an energy back at the end of the turn. Very good stuff. The -7 is fine. I did use it like once or twice throughout the day, just because like if it comes down and your opponent can't remove it, they shouldn't spend any resources. It's not like keeping it at a lower marker count is really that important. Just if it happens to get to 7, it happens to get there. It's a full board wipe for both players, ignoring barrier to the bottom of the deck, and then then I can go grab a Goku and a Frieza that are both mono blue. But there's only a Goku in the deck with the SS3, and it's not that good of a card. It's more so like this could be a board wipe with a +1. So it comes up, but it like isn't important. Play 1 Deborah, just another access to a large unison non-battle card based attacker. It's barrier removal for 4, it's dual attack blocker. It's really, really good. This -1 honestly doesn't come up very frequently for the auto on their turn, but there's like worlds where it could, and certainly there are going to be metas where that kind of effect is really powerful. It's mostly just that like, hey, like 20k dual attack that removes a card ignoring barrier. Very good stuff. Played from a non-hand area, no less, too. The least performing card in my Z deck this week was SSB Vegito Godly Spirit. I'm just one to like not want to take this out of my Z deck. I think there's a lot of games in control mirrors where like you just like out resource each other all the way down to the very end of the game, and it just comes down to like who's got the better Z deck and like who draws the best card. And if I can just produce this and be like, all right, 30 triple, and if they don't have a negate, I win. And if they do, they spend to the negate, and then they're going to lose a card on board and a card in hand, and this becomes a 30k barrier blocker, and suddenly it's like the tide can shift so quickly. So I'm really hesitant to remove it from my Z deck, but it is the only card that I didn't play. I think I played everything else, as well as I might have even played my second Goku Frieza, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But this is like the first probable cut. It's just, I like the card too much. We played 1 Cell, 1 Beerus, and 1 Janemba for our base blue Z battle cards. This is pretty standard at this point. Wide removal, tall removal, and barrier removal. And then this is just like a little tech card. It can just like slightly kind of snipe little stuff. I think in like meta like Kid Ku it's a lot better. Whereas against something like Gohanks, it wasn't very good at all. But like there's worlds where it definitely comes up. And being a 1/1 15k attacker definitely has its moments. So I appreciate Janemba's existence, but it's really these two are the best and most important Z cards in your deck. We play the 1 of Surmounting for additional super Self-Awaken. It's really good. It's also just like a Z battle card you can produce for 1 if you like really need Android 17 online and you know that they don't have a ton of removal. That doesn't really happen a lot, but it does come up where like I'll Floodgate with Android 17 a little earlier than my other cards just because, well, I know that my Android 17 is probably not going to be live that game, but it is because Surmounting is still on the board. Sucks when he gets counterplayed because he doesn't have Deflect, but still important to have Self-Awaken in a non-hand area at all times. And then finally, 2 Black Kamehameha, Mighty Blast. Card's good. We know it's a Z extra, so you need it against yellow. You need it to produce Majin Buu a lot of the times. You use it to literally turn on Raditz. So card is good. Just extra little bits of defensive pressure is really, really important. And then finally, our side deck. We play 1 additional Defending Friends because I want to be defensive sometimes, and against certain decks, it's like having just 1 more energy, like a 1 energy negate is really important. Sucks that he still doesn't get around Koitsukai and he's not always online, but if you're playing against something like Kidku and Heroic Prospects is already not a very good card, swapping it into something that could be very good is important. We play the 4th Gohan, basically only for Kidku, but a lot of times you also play for any deck that you suspect is going to be playing a lot of Koitsukais. If this was like a best of 3 type tournament where Koitsukai is probably not mained but is sided, this is definitely a card that's like every single time you're going to try to watch how many cards that they side into and pull in this Gohan because of the assumption is that they're pulling in Koitsukais. 4th Shu Pilaf Mai, really just for the matchups that you really need it for, right? If you were to come up against like a U7 or something like that. I do also usually pull it in against green and really any aggro deck if I want to like take away that little bit of consistency with Vegeta, and it's like, hey, this might rip away like a double strike, or, you know, especially for green, what I really like to do is rip away barrier and then minus with Boo. That's really, really important, but definitely something to keep in mind. Good card. 1 additional Gohan rare. Just the matchups, again, where it's going to come up. You might use it against Kidku, but you use it a lot against something like a Gohanks of the world. So, good card. I play only 1 extra Self-Awakener and Awakening Talent Pan. She literally came in for exactly 1 matchup today, that day, and it just wasn't really worth it. It's not that like she was a bad card, it's just that I didn't open her, and so it didn't matter. She's just as searchable as the Goku, but she is still worse than the Goku. So I don't think she's super important. She's also way more vulnerable. She doesn't build a Z energy, but she is still the next best Self-Awakener, which is a really, really big hurdle to overcome. We're playing 3 Baby Bitter Revenge of the Saiyan. This could be 2, but I think it's one of those things where, unfortunately, since this deck doesn't draw, those decks that use the 2 energy unisons, they're going to have them online very frequently. You're thinking Bardock and you're thinking Black Vegito. So having them, they're going to go online on their turn 2, maybe their turn 3. If you don't have this card right away, if the Unisons lives for 2, maybe even a 3rd turn, it's too late. You've already gone past this point and you need to start killing them or dealing with it, because now at this point, this is going to be a -1 in potentially -2 in hand, because you have to get it into your drop area. And then also spending the discard and the pay 1 only after you've bottom decked a card. So definitely something where, like, I think this needs to be at 3 in this deck, but in the blue decks that draw a little more, 2 is probably fine. I played 2 God Slicing Black Kamehameha. I think this card is super broken. If you have a Unison in play, typically going to be Go Frieza or Boo. It just prevents a 4 or less from coming into play and you draw a card. Definitely one that is a lot better versus decks where you don't need to necessarily floodgate them out, but you do want to make sure that they're preventing certain cards from being played. You can also use it offensively to prevent, floodgate. So if you're playing against something like Hachiyak and they try to Oceanus you, this is basically your only answer. I have 2 of these and the one of Counter Monkey. So this is definitely an important side-in tech just for the control mirrors. Also good against just random stuff. It's like if you ever played against Invoker or like a blue-green Android deck that wants to ramp, this is how you would prevent it. I played 3 Deburas here. Green is probably your worst matchup. I don't think that's really too hard to say. Maybe not Goku, but certainly Gohan and Cell are very difficult matchups. And so being able to counteract their hand control is really important. That's definitely a matchup where you want to go second, because if you go first and you charge and then ramp, so charge, ramp, you go to 3 energy as they go into their turn 2 with a marker, and they can immediately slam a Solidarity. And chances are that next turn, you can only produce, like the only way for you to remove it is going to be with like exactly Gohan, unless you go crazy minus, and then you produce like a Debura thing. But like if you didn't get awakened yet, or like you had to negate that attack, you're just in a bad spot. So definitely green, you prefer to go second, but it's really not that big a deal. And then finally 2 Koitsukais. This was your kind of like an extra answer to Kidku and a Tapion, but the more I played it, once I realized how good Raditz was into those matchups, I didn't want to take that risk of running black cards in the first place. So now effectively this is only going to be for things like Hachiyak or Cooler Mill, where you really, really need that extra offensive push. So that's really it. For my matchups for the day, I know this is like a crazy long video, but this deck profile is really important to me and the history for Dane Reich, so we're going to go over them. My round 1 was a Kidku, where I think he just kind of pushed a little wrong, but again, I almost died on his turn 2 with marker. So very important that I had Hachiyak there, otherwise I was definitely dead. But I did handle it, and Raditz is really, really important for that. It forces them to just lose so many cards if they want to remove or apply any amount of pressure. And if they don't apply pressure, well, then you're getting more time to draw more cards than them, to do whatever, and swing at 20k all the time, and blah, 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 blah. Very good stuff. Round 2. This is the unfortunate one where I kind of have to put an asterisk on my entire run. So I was playing against Green Goku, headed towards a win. Nicest opponent I've ever had. We both could see that I was heading that way towards the victory, and especially because I called him after this incident occurred, and we showed hands and talked about it, just because we're he's a nice guy, right? My power went out. I was in the middle of going towards a victory, and my power went out, and my signal down in my basement is 1 bar 4G, and even if I was to magically somehow get my whole setup upstairs, to go from my phone, it's 2 or 3 bars 4G. So video calling like that didn't really work very well. And unfortunately, you kind of take a game loss, right? If you're not back in an instant, there's just too many shenanigans that can go on, and realistically respecting the rules of the tournament, it's very important to have those kind of things. So definitely wanted to make sure that he knew that he was still winning the game, in the online sense, but I do believe that I was headed towards being 2-0 at that point. So unfortunate loss there that really probably cost the whole tournament run, but that's just the way it is, and sometimes things are outside of your control. Round 3 was another Kid Coup. This time was the red-yellow variant, and thank goodness, because the second he resolved so I thought his first turn was done, and he's like, no, I got another play here, and I'm like, huh? And he goes for the Grandfather's Heirloom. I was like, oh, so now you can't send cards from your drop to your warp, and suddenly my biggest worry in the entire deck, being the Vegito Secret Rare, was gone. I felt like that matchup was going to be totally fine. At that point, Raditz was still too much of a killer, and eventually you just push. I think I killed his Unison. I think that was that match where he played a baby right on 3, and I was just able to remove it. It was just too much pressure for him to deal with. Then I think about round 4. In round 4, I played against Tapion, which was super, super easy, unfortunately. I don't think the matchup is inherently that easy, but it was a situation where I think he was drawing a little dead, and I Raditzed him back to back to back, basically. And every time you call 4K, he just doesn't get any new cards. He can still gain a 5 or 10k combo power boost and cycle cards, but it wasn't doing enough. There were moments where he just didn't have a 1-drop in his drop area because of Shupilov Mai and Gohan bottom decking them. So it was just a situation where, as a blue mirror, I think if you're the control blue deck, you should generally beat Tapion. But Tapion doesn't really have as strong of pivot options to go into true control. He's kind of more mid-range that can barely get into control to overcome, those aggressive decks. So definitely one there that was a little bit unfortunate. Well, let's talk super fast about round 5, which was against Jamal Hart's Android 21s from set 8. It's a bit scuffed. I'm not sure if I'm going to upload that individual game because we both forgot about the field cards summoning sickness effect, where the first card played every turn, neither player can attack with it. And I just forgot, man. We both I don't play against Android 21 ever, and it's such it's a game state effect that if you just don't think about, that stuff kind of goes under the radar. And so I don't that's, a local of mine says that he'd never play a deck with that type of floating effect because it's just too hard to keep track of at all times. And this really proved it, because I think Jamal probably could have won that exact way had we noticed, but we just literally didn't. And the only time that I knew was after I'd closed OBS during the stream, or not OBS, closed the Discord and pulled back up OBS to be able to see my chat going, he can't attack, blah, blah, blah. I definitely would have had 3 or 4 less attacks, and I won in time due to life. So being a 2-1, we definitely had a bit of a staring contest of Bad Omen versus Counter Monkey. So was a little crazy. Definitely one of the matchups that I probably shouldn't have won, but there was definitely a lot of shenanigans in the early game of he doesn't have to attack, I have no hand, and then he said 3 Bionic Blitz within the first 3 turns. That was kind of bad. So definitely a scuffed game. Back over to round 6 then, I did play our current world champion and my teammate, Michael Legends Carrick. He had a little disconnect as well, but he was pretty quick back on his phone, and since he's my teammate and friend, I definitely wanted to make sure that we played it out. He destroyed me. It was bad. I did not have the hand that was going to produce competent counter Kidku measures, and then on top of that, he had access to cards in his sideboard that typically Kidku players are not playing right now, being Broly Crown and Begrudging Allies. I know that he didn't actually end up using Begrudging Allies against me, but it is one that was definitely part of the consideration. It was like, most Kidkus do not have the immediate options to deal with these options, like my defensive options, but he did. He knew that his worst matchups were going to be the really, really hard control Hachiyak and blue decks, and so he wanted to make sure that he could counteract those, and he really absolutely destroyed me. Round 7, my final one. This is one that maybe it could have gone better. I was probably still a little on tilt from my Carrick loss, just in the fact that like going X2 now meant that I was fighting for top 16, whereas normally in these positions I'm like trying to stay in top 16 or get a better position within it, you know. But I played against Black Trunks, which was fine. I felt like the matchup is a-okay. It's not like great or anything, but you do still probably go even with it, and especially if you have access to things like Heroic Prospects. My big issue was that the way that he played his Secret Rare, I did not have an immediate answer to it that turn, so it's not like I had a Gohan Rare in my hand, I didn't have a Majin Buu out. And then when he passed back to me, I had like completely forgotten how the card worked, which was really, really dumb of me. And I know that sounds crazy, but like I just forgot the way that autos were going to resolve. And I was like, okay, I have this SS4 in my hand, so I can SS4 and draw 4 cards, which is probably the defense that I need to be able to survive his next turn, even while playing around his Secret Rare. But I just didn't do that. I instead went -2 to make 1 Dabura Unison to take care of the Secret Rare, and it didn't do enough. It just literally gave him a life that he could use to kill me right back, and then on the next turn, my only defense was Rumble rather than like a hand-size Floodgate. I think I eventually picked up like a Gohan, but it didn't matter because he's swinging at 30k, and if he's got 7 cards in hand, he can bottom deck 1. And I had like straight up like 3 or 4 cards in hand. Definitely kind of a whack game on my end, and I definitely should have played it better. So I do want to reflect on that and say, good job to him, great job. I just know that I could have played that better, and I really should have. So he ended up getting 17th, which really sucks. I know that like because he like sat down and was like, oh, I was trying to get a top cut, and now I got to play against you. Which, guys, you can all beat good players. Everybody has the capability. Believe in yourself. But unfortunately, he still got 17th. He didn't even get the top, even after beating someone that he respected. So I do feel bad in that sense. But still, congratulations on a very well-deserved X2. That's kind of my day, right? So I beat 2 of my 3 Kidkus. I lost to the one black matchup that I really felt I would have been favored in. I won a blue-green Android mirror, which I shouldn't have lost, or shouldn't have won. Lost to green Goku via a power outage, and then absolutely cakewalked the Tapion matchup. Not really my opponent's fault, just like the way that everything worked out. So that's really it. I appreciate you guys for sticking around. I know this is going to be probably one of my longest videos in a long time, but this deck really does mean a lot to me. I really tried to reclaim the throne, and especially being able to show off Raditz at the time, like since it was still unknown. Now that I've put it out there, some people are at least aware of it, and that might be a little problematic, but it is something where I wanted to claim that little bit of a sneak surprise factor and kind of work my way towards it, but it just didn't really work out that way. And since I took that loss in round 2, I was suddenly not getting paired against Kidkus and Vegito X's. I was mostly getting paired against things like the Android 21 and Tapion, who would normally be X1 at this point. So just one of those weird scenarios. X3 is my worst performance in literally since like Worlds 22, where I went 5-3 with Golden Frieza. So just something to consider. I hope you guys have a good day. Thanks so much for watching, and definitely let me know if you have any questions in the comments. P.S. The requirement for playing blue these days, you have to win locals.